SpaceX achieved one of the biggest milestones with the Starship flight on Sunday, 13th of October 2024. While the flight was generally glorious, it was not without a few hiccups, and believe it or not, these issues could easily become a disaster for SpaceX. What went wrong with the successful Starship flight? Could these issues wreak havoc for the Starship? How would these issues affect SpaceX, and how does it aim to rectify them? Welcome to the Space Minds channel, and in today's video we'll find answers to all these questions and dive a bit further. If you love videos on space exploration, please give this video a thumbs up, share it to your friends, and also subscribe to the channel, and I'll definitely update you on all the latest space news and adventures. B-12 Raptor issues. A major fail? The detachment of the Super Heavy during the hot staging, its high-speed freefall after the separation, the landing burn, and finally the landing with the Mechazilla were probably the top four most anticipated events of the booster. While it was a sight to behold and an event to be remembered, the Super Heavy actually did suffer a couple of issues with its landing. Believe it or not, things could have gone wrong real easily. One of these issues was a fire on the lower part of the booster after it had successfully been wedged between the chopsticks. The flare raged on for over 5 minutes but was put out by the cooling system at the landing site. While the fire was actually overlooked by the crowd, it didn't go unnoticed by SpaceX. After analysis, the space company noted that there might have been a small leak of the propellant fluid, which consisted of liquid methane and liquid oxygen, referred to as methalox. While the actual cause of the leak isn't known yet, the result that followed the leak was more than shocking. The fire engulfed a significant part of the lower end of the Super Heavy, leaving an area of the base a clear rusty brown tint compared to the shiny stainless metallic look the booster has. The burn did more damage. It blistered off the booster's lower section paint, and the heat distorted the structure of the nozzles of the outer engines, almost causing them to fail in the process. If the fire was a bit larger, say 2 or 3 times larger, the Super Heavy would have suffered an inevitable multiple engine failure, followed by a Super Heavy explosion. Just think about the £10 million worth of propellant pumped into the Super Heavy, and how massive an explosion it would have been if the leak was just twice as large as it was. Indeed, with a record of explosions in almost all of the previous test flights, an explosion this time would have caused what we call the curse of the Starship. Even I don't want to think about how devastating it would be for Elon Musk and SpaceX itself. The methane leak still has no known cause, and SpaceX are still analysing the booster's engine to know exactly where and why there was a leak. While the space company hasn't officially addressed the public in the leak yet, its owner Elon Musk did make a tweet on X telling us that the booster suffered warping of a few of its outer engines from the fire and also caused a couple of minor issues. It still didn't stop the big success. Truly, the Super Heavy made an overly successful landing even with the fire, and the chopsticks work so wonderfully you've got to give it all an applaud, maybe a standing ovation even. Speaking of the chopsticks, the Mechazilla tower actually got a bit of an improvement after an issue that was noticed in a previous test. The chopsticks did suffer minimal structural distortion when the Super Heavy first sat on it, though not in this test flight. Anyway, as it received the Super Heavy, there was a vertical 15 cm sag of the chopsticks, deforming them to an extent. It's no surprise actually, the Super Heavy weighs over 8.1 million pounds. While this was actually within the expected range of deformation predicated by engineers at the space company, SpaceX decided on adding a soft pad cushion, much like a truck's shock absorber, to aid and minimize the distortion after the Super Heavy was received. The cushioning system was used in the test flight 5 and actually proved very efficient, keeping the distortion to only a few centimeters, less than 10 even. While this was an improvement made to the Mechazilla prior to the 5th test flight and the B-12 landing, SpaceX already has a few plans for both the Starship and Super Heavy ahead of the 6th test flight in 2025. Let's see some of them, shall we? Improvements before Flight 6. Considering a few issues with the Starship and Super Heavy, and also their needs for planned projects like the Mars mission, the Artemis project, satellite delivery and cargo transport, SpaceX has decided on making a few tweaks to the design of the spacecraft system. Let's talk about the proposed improvements for the Super Heavy today. B-12, the generation of Super Heavy booster used in the 5th test flight, would undergo a series of improvements. While some of these changes might seem only mild or insignificant, others are actually really massive changes. SpaceX aims to improve the booster's recovery system for its landing. The catch of the B-12 booster using the Mechazilla system, despite being successful, still brings up the question of how efficient the system could become. The precision of the catch is among the list of improvements to be made. It's not perfect yet. The Super Heavy itself would require an enhanced navigation system to help it more easily and effectively dock on the Mechazilla. If you followed the live stream on Sunday, you would notice that as the Super Heavy got closer to the Mechazilla, it did slant a bit off the intended alignment position, causing it to incline in such a way that its fiery base was almost against the Mechazilla stem. Indeed, the Super Heavy needs its alignment system corrected so it could make much better catch maneuvers with the Mechazilla. The Super Heavy booster B-13 will feature a couple of upgrades to the Raptor engines used in the B-12 for the 5th test. One of these changes would be the transition from the Raptor 2 to the newly designed Raptor 3. Aside being 7% lighter than the Raptor engines used in the B-12, the Raptor 3 will deliver approximately 280 tons of thrust, which is around 21% more than that produced by the Raptor 2. Additionally, one remarkable aspect of the Raptor 3 is that it no longer requires a heat shield, thus reducing both its mass and complexity. This will remove the need for fire suppression systems, making the engine's design much more simple. With plans to increase the number of Starships, a Super Heavy can launch before it's finally and permanently taken off the launch pad. There have been questions on the durability of the booster. Now, SpaceX aims at improving the booster's structural integrity to withstand the stresses of multiple flights. For the B-13, there might be an integration of stringers, which are additional structural supports within the ring stacks that will serve to improve the overall rigidity of the booster. It would also include a vented interstage for the hot staging, which could potentially improve the payload capacity by about 10%. The thrust puck at the aft dome has been redesigned to allow it to support the increased number of engines and thrust output required for the 6th test flight. Like I said before, we should anticipate new changes in the software used for the booster's flight and landing systems. The software updates will include enhanced autonomous navigation capabilities for the launch and landing, allowing the spacecraft to make real-time decisions during flight. We might also see updates to the control algorithms of the booster, aimed at optimizing performance during liftoff and re-entry. This would include fine-tuning how the rocket maneuvers, thus maintaining its stability and control even at the meanest of weather. The onboard computing capabilities will also be improved upon to facilitate faster data processing, allowing the Starship to analyze sensor data and respond to changes in the environment for the Super Heavy return. As the B-13 will be using Raptor 3 engines, software improvements will include better control of these engines, allowing for precise thrust angulation and improved performance during flight. This would help prevent the alignment error the B-12 suffered in the 5th test flight. Due to previous delays by the FAA in relation to environmental assessments on the Starship launch, the B-13 for the 6th flight is likely to incorporate a few environmental adjustments. One of these adjustments would be the reduction of carbon emissions made by the booster. The methane-powered Raptor engines, although using cleaner fuel compared to traditional rocket fuels, still produce water vapor and soot at high altitudes, contributing to radiative forcing, which can warm the planet, the whole global warming thing. So, to cut down on these environmental impacts, SpaceX will be optimizing the fuel handling and launch operations of the Starship's boosters. Currently, modifications are being made to better monitor and control the emissions during launches and test flights. SpaceX is also reviewing the boosters' launch and recovery methods to reduce the environmental footprint, particularly in the regions surrounding the Starbase facility in South Texas. This will extend to protecting local wildlife and habitats, with more measures to be taken for managing waste and noise pollution during launches. There might also be changes to the booster's water deluge system used for cooling it on landing, thus getting it ready quicker for a propellant refill and a new Starship capsule launch. Let me add that we might not see the Super Heavy using the Mechazilla in the 6th flight, owing to concerns on the effect of the heat on the surrounding area. Still, we all know SpaceX will do something crazy. So, let's wait and watch. With that, we've come to the end of this video. If you've enjoyed watching it, hit the like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Space Minds for the latest updates on our space news and adventures.